The honourable member for Regina, Lewvan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this month, the Auditor General reported that the Phoenix pay system would continue to plague our public servants for years to come. Earlier this week, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement told the Government Operations Committee that the government should mostly have fixed the Phoenix pay system by the end of 2018. Therefore, our public servants are going to have to rely on emergency pay for months, if not years, to come. The Liberal government has also come to rely on emergency pay as a political explanation for its inaction on Phoenix. For about a year and a half, I've been asking the government why it does not empower managers in departments and agencies to write checks to employees that they know are not being paid. The government's answer is that, well, those employees can apply for emergency pay. For about 8 months, I've been asking the government to establish a hotline for MP offices so that we can assist constituents that are having problems with Phoenix. The government's answer is that those people who are under stress can apply for emergency pay. So I would like to really focus this evening's adjournment debate on the question of emergency pay, how it works, what the problems are, and what a solution could be. I think at the outset we need to recognize that the existing emergency pay system is not working. When we hear about federal public servants who lose their homes because of Phoenix, or federal public servants who are applying for provincial social assistance because of Phoenix, it's obvious that those people were not able to access emergency pay. And one of the reasons for that are glitches within the Phoenix system itself. So, for example, Mr. Speaker, someone who is identified within Phoenix as having received an overpayment, whether or not they actually got the money, is automatically ineligible to apply for emergency pay. Mr. Speaker, even public servants who might qualify for emergency pay are very reluctant to seek it because they know that it is just a loan that has to be repaid. And often, public servants are asked to repay the gross amount of that emergency pay rather than the net amount that they were actually advanced. So a consequence of receiving emergency pay is often being trapped in a cycle of having to apply for more emergency pay in order to repay the initial emergency payment. Public servants shouldn't be locked into that cycle, and it's quite understandable that they don't want to be. It strikes me that a very simple solution is, instead of treating emergency pay as a loan that needs to be repaid, to start treating it as an advance on the pay that public servants are owed. So rather than expecting public servants to actually write the government a check to repay those emergency amounts, we should simply debit emergency pay from the future salary that our public servants are owed. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this would actually make emergency pay a far more effective safety net for public servants caught up in the Phoenix boondoggle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank once again my honourable colleague from Regina, who once again is bringing a very constructive perspective to the debate. But I would like to correct him on something he said. I don't think that he realizes that the government has taken action with regard to the Phoenix pay system. He knows very well that the government has done everything in its power and established a very clear action plan. in order to rectify the problems associated with the pay system that were handed down to us by the previous government. This pay system that was poorly designed, that was botched from the outset, and that unfortunately is still affecting far too many of our public servants who work very hard.
That has characterized our work, again, as the member would well know, is our constructive relationship and our proactivity and transparency in working with our partners in public sector unions, public employee unions, and those, of course, that have been most affected. And we have worked with them very, very hard in order to establish clear priorities in terms of processing some of the backlog. This includes categories of pay transactions such as disability and acting payments and maternity or paternity or parental leaves, and we've made great progress on those. It's included our emphasis now on an employee-centric approach where we clean up an entire file or an employee pay situation which may have 2 or 3 or 4 or more transactions that are outstanding or in error and need to be corrected. And with respect to emergency pay, we've worked very, very hard, and this is actually something I'm very, very proud of. We've worked very hard from the clerk of the Privy Council on down throughout all of the government to make sure that all departments, deputy ministers on down, are under absolutely no there's no misunderstanding that departments must respond and respond quickly to emergency pay situations, situations of hardship or duress. These situations are escalated very quickly. Emergency pay is issued. Indeed, this emergency pay must be repaid, but only when the employee and their pay situation is resolved and they are able to do essentially a one-for-one exchange in terms of emergency pay. I think we've shown great sensitivity in working with employees along these lines. I do stress, as the Deputy Minister said the other day, that we do send out over 300,000 bi-weekly paychecks in every pay period, and we do so with great precision. The problems associated with the Phoenix pay system often come when employees have other circumstances, overtime, shift work, and I won't go through all of the categories because my time is expiring, Mr. Speaker, but emergency pay and ensuring that employees are not left in situations of hardship is something we take very, very seriously. We approach with great compassion and are happy to do.
Well, member for Regina Lewvan.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Secretary tried to suggest that the existing emergency pay system is working properly, and there are blatant examples that it is not working properly, of people losing their homes, of people applying for welfare. So I think we need to kind of get those facts clearly on the record. But the question I would ask, even if the emergency pay system were working well, why do we expect public servants to repay that money to the government? Why are we not content to accept that money as an advance on pay that public servants are in fact owed? I'd be very interested in hearing from the Parliamentary Secretary what his objection would be to simply debiting the emergency pay from the salary that public servants receive if and when they actually receive it. It seems to me this would make the system work much more smoothly for public servants who are in need.
Well, Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, I think we're actually saying the same thing, Mr. Speaker, that emergency pay obviously has to be repaid, but it is only expected when the employee's pay file or pay transactions are properly executed. I would end on this, that I think we have demonstrated that situations of catastrophe, people who are in a very bad way with respect to their personal situation because of problems associated with the Phoenix pay system, I would encourage the member, as I would encourage all colleagues in this House, to, if they are aware of such circumstances, to make us aware of them. And I think we've shown that we rapidly escalate those issues and rapidly resolve them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.